Good morning, Warzone kids. It's a nice morning on the trail to the Western Lands here in Vermont, 24 degrees. Warzone kids is my term for those of us like myself. I'm a child sex abuse survivor. Warzone kids is my term for those of us whose childhoods were more like a guerrilla war against our psyche and less like a supportive environment, supportive nursery where we could get everything we needed. And I think of our psyches, our soul, our self, who we are, as a Jenga tower. You know, at the beginning of the game, it's a solid block of wood made up of smaller pieces. A cosmos, it's a Greek word for that, a whole made up of parts. And just like Jenga, every turn in the game of Jenga, you take one of the small blocks out and you put it on top. Over the course of a war-zone childhood, every bit of harm, abuse, and neglect takes pieces out of that Jenga tower and puts them up on top. And every game of Jenga ends when the tower falls down. By the time we enter adulthood, we Warzone kids have a Jenga tower that looks like we're getting very close to the end of the game. The thing is tall and leaning and tottery. Don't look at it hard, don't step close to it, don't touch it, whatever you do. And as a Warzone kid, you can find yourself living an adult life where the whole thing, your whole life is just oriented around keeping that Jenga tower from falling over. As an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder, got a lot of narcissism in my psyche. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. And the task ahead for us Warzone kids is to live our lives right now, to live our lives in the present, to learn and become what we are. And I think of life as a pilgrimage to the Western Lands. And I think of myself as a pilgrim on the trail to the Western Lands. I think of the Western Lands as a place of peace and wholeness, where we learn and become what we are. And like all pilgrimages, very little difference between the journey and the destination. The journey itself is an act of devotion. Life is what's happening right here and now. And on the trail to the Western Lands, the most important step is the one that you're taking right now. The most important part of the trail is the ground underneath your feet right here and now. You can live life dragging the log of the past behind you like an old woodcutter trying to whittle the past into something you can make sense of. That's a fool's errand. You can live life like a young hunter with your eyes peeled on the trail way ahead, as far ahead as you can see. Maybe you'll find the quarry, happiness, lurking just around the next bend. That's a fool's errand. Your life is right here and now on the ground under your feet. Well, I'm thinking this morning about vampires. And it's very suitable because rosy-fingered dawn is not yet up. And if I were a vampire, I would be feeling an urgent need right about now to get to the dirt of my homeland, crawl inside that coffin, pull the lid closed, because it's fixing to get light outside. But I love vampires. I love vampire movies and stories of vampires. And I had three of them on my mind this morning. Nosferatu, Let the Right One In, and True Blood. Nosferatu, and I'm thinking here about the Robert Eggers remake, 2022. No, maybe it's 25. I don't know. Last couple of years. Maybe it's just last year. I love Robert Eggers. He makes these kind of atmospheric, creepy, psychological folk tales. The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and Nosferatu. What Nosferatu captures, I think, is the essence of the vampire, psychologically. Nosferatu, in the Robert Eggers movie, says to Elizabeth, that's his kind of true love. He says to her, I am appetite. That is his nature. He is appetite. I love that. Because it is, I don't know how you can capture the nature of a vampire more truly. I may be talking about vampires, a mythical, supernatural being of folklore, and I may be talking about the human psyche. You be the judge. I am appetite, Nosferatu says. Well, that's right. The vampire never gets enough. The vampire has to live on the living blood of another. Or rather, the vampire requires the blood of the living in order to remain undead. Not quite alive, the vampire, but just this side of dead. Undead. The vampire requires living blood to sustain its own unlife. The unlife of the vampire requires the blood of the living to maintain itself. And it is a thirst that is never quenched. It is a hunger that is never satisfied. It is an appetite that never ends. Each and every day, the vampire requires the blood of the living in order to remain undead. Now, it is in the nature, my shrink has said to me so many times, make me sick to my stomach, the way a vampire feels when it eats human food. When you're acting unconsciously, Ben, you'll use everyone for everything. When you're acting unconsciously, you'll use everyone for everything. And what he means by that is the idea that somehow or another, we as human beings have drives, desires. We have desires that are fueled by drives, whatever those might be. The theories and accounts of it don't particularly matter, and you can have different ones. But the phenomena is the same. We have drives as human beings, drives toward life, or drives toward death. It's all sex and death, Ben. It's another thing my shrink has said. It's all sex and death, and the death is only a problem because it interrupts the sex. Well, sex is life, death is death. And when you're acting unconsciously, you'll use everyone for everything. It's an element of many war zone psyches that we are deprived in our early years. There is something about childhood sex abuse survivors, such as this guy, that the experience, and I think this holds true probably no matter what your experience was, if you're a war zone kid, if you're a child sex abuse survivor, some other kind of war zone kid, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, societal or racial abuse. We're deprived of something that we need. We have too much of some stuff and not enough of others. If you think of a plant in the nursery, it needs light, it needs humidity, it needs moisture, it needs food, it needs soil. And war zone kids had too much of some stuff and not enough of other stuff. It's not balanced. We were deprived of something, whatever that is. Love, care, affection, security, safety, physical safety, psychological safety. We were deprived. And for many of us, for this guy, and I know I'm not alone, for many of us, you can find yourself as an adult driven by those needs to fill that deprivation, to satisfy that deprivation. You can kind of have a sense that you had a permanent appetite installed through deprivation in your childhood. If you didn't get love and care as a child, chronically over time, you may have developed a psyche, a Jenga tower that is in the shape of one who's just perpetually in search of filling those needs. Right? Vampires, it's much easier to think of ourselves, it's much easier when I think of myself as the familiar, right? Vampires have familiars. These are slaves, servants, that have been halfway turned by a vampire. Vampires have familiars which serve their needs. And I don't know how it works. They suck some of the familiar's blood, but they don't give the familiar their blood, something like that. Got to drink the blood of a vampire to become a vampire. The vampire drinks some of your blood, and if he doesn't kill you all the way, you become bonded to that vampire. Well, there's no more accurate, if you wanted to imagine my childhood as a folk tale, there is no more accurate image than myself as a familiar to a couple of vampires. They needed me in order to sustain their undead existence. Renfield in Dracula. Renfield lived to serve Dracula's needs. Or Guillermo in What We Do in the Shadows, a great show. He lived to serve Nandor's needs. If you like vampires, you ain't seen that show, go watch it. It's amazing. Well, that was my childhood. My folks were driven by psychological needs of their own. They were appetite, and I was their food. And I had a severe deprivation of such things as actual care for my psyche. I was their, Narcissus stares into the reflecting pool and sees himself. Part of my job was to keep the reflecting pool very still so that my folks could see themselves reflected in it. I was there to serve them, to show them images of themselves reflected in me. That instilled in me a very deep need for love and care and affection. And much of my life has been spent in the relentless pursuit of fulfilling those needs. I can look at much of my life and say, I was appetite. Nosferatu. Well, let the right one in and let me in. A couple of great vampire movies. I forget which one is which. There's a Swedish original, and then there's an American remake. They're both excellent. One's called Let Me In, and the other's called Let the Right One In. They are both excellent, and they are about the relationship between the vampire and the familiar. And they are melancholy meditations upon the needs of the vampire for the familiar and the need of the familiar for the vampire. The familiar has to let the vampire in. The vampire has to be invited in. Vampires live on the blood of the living. They sustain their undeath on the blood of the living. And they can go out and suck someone's blood and drain them dry and kill them all day and all night. In fact, they do. But for the familiar, the vampire has to be invited in. Vampire cannot barge their way into your house. They have to be invited in. Let the right one in. There is no right one. Never let the vampire in. But if you grew up, if you can identify with this dynamic of the vampire at all, whether as the familiar to vampires in your life, or if you can look back and see ways in which you may have been a vampire looking for other people to meet your needs. In order to find a familiar, that familiar had to invite you in. They got words for that in the psychological literature. Codependence, enmeshment. Those are bloodless words. And I like blood, so I like the folktale image of the vampire and the familiar. Let the right one in. The familiar has to be led to believe. The familiar has to convince himself or herself that the vampire's got something they need. The vampire can fulfill their needs. The vampire can satisfy their hunger, their appetite. And the vampire cannot satisfy its own needs. See, vampire can go out and drain people dry and kill them. But the vampire's got to have someone to look after him. The vampire is not a self-sufficient beast. The vampire needs someone to open and close the coffin, needs someone to protect him from the sunlight of the cosmos. The vampire cannot look at the bright sun of the reality of their life. The vampire has to live in darkness, the black darkness of unconsciousness. That is what sustains a vampire. The vampire needs a familiar. Otherwise, the vampire will just flame out. Something will go wrong, get caught outside. The vampire will be no more. It will perish. Let the right one in. Ponder on this. If you're the vampire and you're looking for someone that can meet your needs, you're looking for a familiar. And if you're a familiar, if you find yourself drawn to people who suck the lifeblood out of you, you may have been infected by the vampiric virus to the extent that you think you need to find a vampire to fulfill you. All that vampire is going to do is suck out your blood. If you're the vampire, you might think that one of these days you're going to find a living host that'll satisfy your appetite. You will not. As Nosferatu said, I am appetite. Appetite is appetite. There is nothing but appetite. The quest to let the right one in, the looking, is this the right vampire? Is this the one that ain't going to suck me dry? The quest to find the right vampire to be a familiar to. The quest to find the right familiar. None of this lasts through time. It's all the quest for true blood. HBO series about vampires, True Blood. Now, I think for vampires, if they were real, they're not. But they are real in the sense in which I mean them. I think True Blood is like a fantasy for vampires. True Blood is like a fantasy series. It's like Lord of the Rings for vampires. Because True Blood is the illusion that the vampire can find a way to live without taking life from others. The vampire can find a way to live sustainably. The green life for a vampire. Vampires can find a way to be sustainable. It's True Blood. It's synthetic. It's synthetic. It is blood. It's living off blood, but it's living off a simulacra of blood. It's living off synthetic blood. You don't really have to get it from a host. No. See? You can find true blood. Well, I wonder whether the quest for true love for this guy isn't just my version of the vampiric quest for true blood, for a way to satisfy the appetites without draining the life from the living to maintain one's own undeath. True love for this guy may just be true blood, and I'll tell you why I say for this guy. Because I can look, I'm 51 years old, I'm a Gen Xer from Oklahoma City. I can look at my life. I was married for 20 years. My divorce is final in 2019. We split up out of that house in 2018. It was 7-8 years ago now. I can look at this guy's quest for true love post-divorce, and I can tell you that I found it a few times. And every time ended in a flaming airplane crash, or better yet, every time ended in that vampire being left out in the sun. I like that image. The sun of the cosmos, the sun of reality. Every time I thought I found true love, I found myself burnt to a cinder by the sun of the cosmos, by my actual experience. which was the things I felt like were sparks, but there were sparks that started a conflagration that burned the whole thing down. I was trying to find someone else that could meet all my needs and satiate my appetites for affection, for love, for care, my fear and terror of betrayal, and my certainty that betrayal lay around every bend. You see, for this guy, the quest for true love was a quest to satiate my appetites, but those appetites were just appetites. There's never enough. Those appetites were driven by deprivation, the needs I had as a child for love, for care. As long as I look to satiate those appetites, to fulfill those drives in other people, I am appetite, and that's all they are, is appetite. And the quest for true love is just a quest to find true blood. Let me find the right one this time. Let me find the right person so it doesn't flame out. Let me find the right person so I don't get burnt to death by the sun. The thing that felt like true love to me for long stretches of my life was just blood. It was just the act of sucking blood from the living to sustain my own unlife. With a psyche like mine, suffered from a deprivation of love and care as a child. I mean real love and care. I had the word love, but all I was a familiar. Blood constantly going out. And then I found myself an adult looking to replace that lost blood and taking it from the living. The quest for true love for me is a quest for true blood. The fantasy, the Lord of the Rings fantasy for vampires, that you can live the life of a vampire without turning the people around you into dried up husks, and without finding yourself in an enmeshed, codependent arrangement with the familiar. Now, that's this guy talking. Of course I believe in love. I'm open to it. But I'm not looking for true blood. I'm not looking for what feels to me like true love. Now it doesn't even feel like true love anymore. Now it feels like a yearning for a car crash. Now it feels like the sparks that used to feel like true love to me now just feel like the sun coming up and hitting the face of a vampire. Soon comes the conflagration, and after that comes destruction. That's this guy. Vampires are the human psyche. Humans are human beings, not vampires, and you don't have to stay a vampire forever. It's a choice. You can drink true blood, the blood of the living. Or you can just drink water. I'm a corny guy. I've got borderline personality disorder. I'm prone to being horribly corny and sentimental. I embrace it. You cannot cringe to death. I have learned this. The water of life is better than true blood. The water of life is what other people are actually like, what love with another person is actually like, and what you are actually like. There's nothing magic to it. There's no satiating the desires. If you are living life as appetite, that's all there is for you is appetite. Drink water, not blood. That's what I tell myself. So there we are. The sun is coming up, and I've been musing on vampires this morning. And maybe you can relate. Or maybe you just amuse yourself listening to the ravings of a crazy guy. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. Well, whichever it is, that's what it is. And it's a beautiful day on the trail to the Western Lands, Pilgrim. Daylight's burning, but I ain't afraid of it because I ain't no vampire. I like the light of the sun and rose rosy-fingered dawn on my face. That brings life, not death. Today's a good day on the trail, Pilgrim. We can get in a lot of miles. Let's walk them together. Daylight's burning.